We're about to witness a generational playoff run, but it all starts tonight with the play-in. Two games on slate today, but Bakari is joining the show. Great to have you, but we're going to be going through every single play-in game, and we're going to be deciding who makes it. But I want to hear from you guys at home, so drop your play-in predictions in the comments. I'm going to be responding to each and every comment as soon as I possibly can. But let's not waste any time. What do we know so far here in the Western Conference? Well, we know the 3-6 matchup is going to be the Timberwolves and the Suns. Timberwolves come into this with a monster in Anthony Edwards, right, in his short playoff career, but it's been legendary. And they have the number one defense as well. But the Suns, with their big three stars, are 3-0 against the number one defense. And they just played just a few nights ago, and it was very, very chippy. So we'll talk about that next week. But then death taxes, and the Clippers and Mavericks are going to meet somehow, some way in the playoffs. But the Clippers, they're 2-1. I do want to throw it out there, not making excuses for my dark horse team to win it all. The Mavericks, two of those games happened before the trade deadline, before the Mavericks revamped their roster and got much needed size. But that is what we know as far as the 3-6 and 4-5 in the West. The 1 seed and the 2 seed, we also know, are the Thunder and the Denver Nuggets. The Thunder are going to be playing the last team to make it in. Of course, we'll find that out here in a minute. And then the Denver Nuggets, they're going to be playing either the New Orleans Pelicans or the Los Angeles Lakers. The Pelicans come into this matchup as a 7 seed. The Lakers, of course, right behind at the 8 seed. And you see the tail of the tape, the team record, the Vegas betting lines, the offensive rating, and the defensive rating. But also, I wanted to throw it out there. The Lakers are 3-1 against the Pelicans this season. Bakari, welcome to the show. How you doing? And after that, dive into the matchup.
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's good to be back on the show. Obviously, this time of the season is the most exciting part of the season for the NBA. So, anytime I can come on and give thoughts and about the postseason, it's always a pleasure. And then going into this matchup, the Lakers and Pelicans, to me, this is one of those matchups where I thought a lot about not only the on the court matchups and kind of just like the very what you get just looking at these two teams. I also thought about the momentum change in these two
Yes.
teams going over the last stretch of season, and that's kind of what my thought process was on kind of all of these matchups. Like, what does their momentum look like going into the play-in? How many games have they won? Out of the last few or whatever. Obviously, the Lakers and Pelicans just played the other night, last game of the season, and it was huge for the Pelicans. They had to win that game to stay out of the play-in. They ended up losing that game, and the Suns take their spot. Now the Suns are locked in. They don't have to go through this. The Pelicans, I think were at highest like 4 or 5 seed this
Yeah.
season, and
Yeah.
all they had to do was just keep a steady pace
Post.
going. And that unfortunately for the Pelicans and another team we'll talk about later in the Kings, it just didn't happen for those teams. They just kind of fell off the track a little bit. And you look at the record 49-33, it's a good record. It's just it's a competitive West. So for me, in this matchup, even though the Pelicans probably have more positional advantages on the court, the Lakers have LeBron James, Anthony Davis. They've won a chip. D'Angelo Russell, obviously, second half of the season, he's played well. And I am going to personally pick the Lakers to win this game. In my
Yeah.
opinion, like I said, momentum going into it. LeBron and AD, they know what they have to do. I know AD was hobbled that other game. I'm expecting him to play. I just it's hard for me to bet against these two. In the Lakers, when they need to get it done, they feels like they've gotten it done. They're no stranger. They've been in the play-in every single year, other than the time they completely missed it. So I just feel like they know what to do. They know how to get the job done for one game. They'll take care of it and face Denver. They want another shot at Denver, is what I think. So
Absolutely. I'm gonna get into that in just a moment, but I will follow you here. I'm also gonna take the Lakers in this one playoff matchup, or in this play-in game rather. But also I want to clarify here on the screen. If you see these green boxes, right, like CJ McCollum over D'Angelo Russell, it's just a general. I went through each position by position. Who has the positional advantage as far as player talent wise? And of course, the red is, in my opinion, best player in the game. We know in these critical must-win scenarios, your best player has to be the best player. And just overall from the Pelicans and the Lakers standpoint, or I guess just any standpoint, if you go into a must-win game, you want to have the best player. And I think in that scenario, it's either LeBron or Anthony Davis in this game. But I want to ask you a question, Bakari. There's been a lot of murmurs going around, and just a lot of opinions going around. That's a better way to put it. if you were Darvin Ham, if you're LeBron James, if you're Anthony Davis, would you risk, I guess kind of forfeiting this game, not forfeiting, but purposely losing and getting ready for next game against either the Kings or the Warriors to avoid the Nuggets, but still be in a must-win scenario to make the playoffs against the Thunder? What's your approach here? Would you go all in, just take care of business and take care of the Nuggets first round? Or would you rather try to avoid the Nuggets and go the more riskier way?
To me, I'm getting into the playoffs when I can. I'm not
Yes.
going to purposely try and lose. The Kings and the Warriors, no matter which team you play in that second play-in game, they're going to be a very tough. It's going to be a very tough game. You're probably going to be the underdog, for both of those teams. Potentially. And it'll be hard. It'll be tough to win those games, especially with a team. Whoever wins that play, that 9-10 play-in game, they're going to come in with momentum. They're going to say, we're a game away from making the playoffs. We have to do what it takes. And I think, for either one of those, for either one of these teams, that you just shouldn't do that. And not to mention, I wasn't the biggest fan of the Thunder during the full course of the season. I feel like there are a lot of other teams that probably have a better potential of winning the championship. But at the same time, OKC is no rollover team. Like they're
Right.
like it's no guarantee you play them in the first round. It's like, hey, we got a first round win. No, this team is the number one seed for a reason. Obviously, will that play translate to the playoffs? We don't know. They have a young team, but the Lakers. It seems like the Thunder is their kryptonite. It seems like they never beat the
Yes.
Thunder. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I'd get in when I can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I understand, maybe trying to avoid the reigning champions, but I think it goes like you mentioned. I think it's starting to get to the point where the Thunder are getting disrespected.
Yeah.
Even though they're young, even though they're the youngest team in basketball, they're the number one seed in one of the most stacked Western conferences we've seen in a long time. It just that something like that can't go under the radar. And again, we're acting like they don't have a guy that should be probably the MVP this season in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But regardless, I'm going to take the Lakers in this matchup as well. And that means the Pelicans will go on to face the winner of the 9-10 matchup. And we'll find out who that is here in just a moment as we dive into it. It's a little bit of a deja vu here moment, Bakari, as these teams met last year in the 3-6 matchup. The Light the Beam Kings and, of course, the Warriors. They stumbled into that 6th seed, but they took care of business. And it was a legendary series. Of course, Steph Curry capped it off with a 50-point performance at the time, was the most points by an individual player in a game 7. But they meet again here in a must-win scenario, kind of like that game 7, Bakari. But again, both teams come in with the same record. And again, the Warriors have a little bit better of an offense, a little bit better of a defense. And I think the difference for me here, Sacramento's going to be home in this matchup. Last year, the Warriors couldn't buy a road win. In my argument when we came on the pod was the Warriors only needed to win one road playoff game in last year's playoff series. This year, it's kind of different. The Warriors are a better road team than home team, as crazy as that might sound. And I think what it boils down to, as much as I love Domantas Sabonis, they missing a guy like Malik Monk, a guy that could be the sixth man of the year, and missing that much needed spacing in Kevin Huerter. It's too much to overcome. I think the Warriors, in maybe their last dance together, get the win here and they move on to take the Pelicans. But your thoughts here about this matchup?
I agree with you. I think when we did these predictions a while back, it was like there are a few different teams that we had, and then it was like, what team do you see not making the playoffs? And I picked the Kings. I said back then I think the Lakers and the Warriors will get in from the playoffs. Obviously, I didn't expect the Pelicans to fall as well, so
Right.
that happened. But I do see the Warriors winning this game. I was watching it Get Up this morning on ESPN, and it's crazy because I think the Warriors have like a 27-12 record or a 20-12 record over that last amount of games. They were talking about basically will the Warriors core of Steph, Clay, and Dre come back, and they were like, well, I mean, I think so because once this team really got going, once Draymond came back from that suspension and these role players kind of filled out that rotation and this team kind of understood what it took to win each night in and night out, they've been really they have been good since then. And I think all the adversity they've had to go through the season, they went on a stretch where they had to win basically like six games in a row just to stay into the play-in. Not to mention when the Rockets were on their tail and winning game after game as well, and Jalen Green was on a tear. This is a Warriors team that's been through adversity basically from what 2014, 2015
Yes.
to now, and it never stops. So this Kings team, obviously they were a 3 seed last year. They have injuries, like you said, to Malik Monk, Kevin Huerter, but it just feels like this Kings team through the year. I remember I asked you at the beginning of the season, who do you want more, De'Aaron Fox or Sabonis? And I felt like this team was still kind of trying to figure that out going into this year, because last year De'Aaron Fox wins clutch player of the year. They're the 3rd seed. They're the highest scoring offense ever, highest scoring efficiency. But this year it's been more clear that Sabonis is that person for them. And De'Aaron hasn't been on that same level. I'm not saying he isn't on a
Yeah.
level. He just
Right.
hasn't been on that same level as Sabonis, who any other year is probably first team All NBA. So I think the Warriors haven't figured out. They know what they have to do, and unfortunately the Kings are just an odd man out.
Yeah, no, last week I talked about it on my award predictions. I said Sabonis, he might not be a top 3 MVP candidate, but I think he's in the top 5. As crazy as that might sound, if not top 6. I think Sabonis has had that great of a season, and I think if De'Aaron Fox can play like on Sabonis's level, I mean, that's 2 All-NBA second-team players, coming into this must-win scenario. And in that case, I think this Kings team can make some noise. However, again, you're relying on Keon Ellis to play and shoot and space the floor at the level of a Kevin Huerter. I just don't. You're going to need that spacing. Now, I will say, if Steph Curry doesn't have it going, this Warriors team is an ugly team to watch. It's not very fun to watch them play basketball. So if Steph has an off night, you might as well write the Kings into that 7 or that 8 seed matchup against the Pelicans. But I want to ask you this: if the Warriors lose this game, do you think, what's the chances that this big 3 still comes back together? Because there's rumors that the Magic are prepared to throw a max 4-year contract to Klay Thompson to get that veteranship and that spacing that the Magic need desperately over there. And of course, Draymond has a connection with LeBron James. What is the chances if this Warriors team loses this matchup that this big 3 is together going into next year?
I'd say 60-40. And
Yeah.
I think it comes down to I think honestly that this team will probably choose to keep Draymond over Klay. Klay's making 43 this year, and I know that sounds crazy because given all the actions that Draymond
Yes.
has been through, but you see the difference when he's off the court versus on the court. What was it, like a couple of nights ago? He was like the first player that had a double-double with no shot attempts. Like he had 10 and
Absolutely.
13.
The
It's
most
like
Draymond game possible.
is literally, and Draymond is that type of player for them. Klay Thompson has always had a problem. The last couple of years, he's had a problem with his ego. This year, he kind of dialed it back a bit. He decided he could come off the bench, kind of took that approach to it, but he's still making $43 million. And I think if the Magic offer him something crazy, he's going to be like, hey, maybe they see the player I am that I feel like I was before I got benched. And I think that he could possibly leave. But like I mentioned, this team down the stretch of this year, once their team really came together, once you had guys like Tracy Jackson Jr. or Tracy Jackson playing good, you had Posey playing good, you had all
Yeah.
these role players playing better. This team has played better as well. Chris Paul was hurt for majority of the year; he's come back. So I feel like I feel like this is the last dance, but they wouldn't be opposed to having this is the last dance
Right.
next when all
Right.
those guys are really going to be off of the contract. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As much as I want to say 60-40 makes sense, I can't picture these guys split. So I'm going to literally say 99-1. I think that they're just going to figure it out and bring these guys back and just ride it out, because I think all 3 guys deserve jerseys retired. And you can argue all 3 deserve their statues there in Golden State for what they've done for that franchise. But for as much as I love Sabonis, as much as I've been a stand for him, we both have the Warriors moving on here to take on the New Orleans Pelicans. Of course, the Pelicans have a 3-game record advantage. Like you mentioned, there was times where they were a top 3, top 4 seed throughout a good part of the year. It's just this last month and a half of basketball where they've kind of fell off. But I'm going to assume the Pelicans, being home in this matchup, they're going to be favored against the Warriors. The season series is 1-1. Of course, Warriors have a little bit better of an offense, but the Pelicans, if they were healthy this last month of the season, they have a top 5 defense. So who do you have in this matchup? Of course, the Warriors still have the best player, but the Pelicans, you can argue, better overall unit.
Yeah, that's who I'm going with. I think the
I
Pelicans,
agree.
there's no way that Zion and Brandon Ingram coming back now are going to let this team not make the playoffs. Obviously, all we've been looking for since I think it was to the 2022 year, all we've been looking for from this Pelicans team is how does Zion play with this team. Now, obviously, a couple of years have passed since they almost upset the Suns in the first round. Coming, I think that was what the first year that the play-in
Teams.
was there, or
Yeah.
whatever, the second year, and
Second year,
they won
second
the
year.
play-in 6 games and they take the Suns too. So, that was a good series. And all we wanted since then is to see how Zion plays in the playoffs. And I think we'll get a chance of that this year. Like I mentioned, that this Warriors team has been really good, but this Pelicans team has been in the middle of that West the entire year. It wasn't until this last year where things really got heated and kind of tighter that this team started losing a few games. But like I said, they're 49-33. So it's still a really good team. I just to me, it'll be hard, especially if Herb Jones is able to kind of like neutralize Steph and kind of hold them. Who's we're going to step up for that Warriors team? Obviously, the next person up will probably be Clay, but we all know Clay can go for 45 one night
I was gonna
and
say this would be that Clay game. Yeah.
450 the next game. So, I have the Pelicans going on this one.
Absolutely. And again, as much as even I'm a Cavs fan and Steph Curry and this core killed us and we were traumatized and we were hearing the Warriors chant in our nightmares every single night because they just kept dominating us, especially in those third quarters. Sean Livingston still has never missed a mid-range. As much as I would love to see this core go to the playoffs one more time, and if this is their last dance, well, I'll say this: if fate is having it, this is going to be their last dance. I'd rather see the Warriors in the playoffs, just one more hoorah. But if it's not going to be, then I want this Pelicans team. They're just such more of a complete team. And I mean, if this last month and a half of basketball wasn't as bad as it was, we'd be saying, hey, they can go out there and upset the Clippers or go out there and upset, the 3 seed Timberwolves because they've been that solid of a team all season. I just hope that they can pull it together and not completely fall apart and get into that first round to play the Oklahoma City Thunder. So the Thunder are 2-1 against the Pelicans. But again, two very young teams, two teams that have a lot to prove in their own rights. And again, a very interesting first round matchup in that one. The 2-7 is the rematch of the Western Conference Finals. The Denver Nuggets, excuse me, they're playing the Lakers. And of course, they're 3-0 against them this season. They swept them in the Western Conference and even had a better record against them in last season. So realistically, they've won 9 of the last 10 games against the Lakers. And again, LeBron and AD played in each and every one of those. So the Denver Nuggets really just have the number of the Los Angeles Lakers. But that is our 1-8, 2-7 matchup. And now at the midway mark, before we get into the West, I want to ask you a couple questions because, again, I've seen these floating around and I'm interested in your opinion. We're now 4 years into this NBA play-in. It was introduced in the bubble. Of course, we had our questions about it. We said, what is this? Why are the Wizards even getting a chance to go to the bubble? Because they were like 6 games under. It was such a weird and interesting concept at the time, but now some people will say this is the best thing that Adam Silver has done as a GM here in the NBA, or as a commissioner rather. But I want your thoughts about it. The Cavs have been in this once. Of course, it didn't go as we planned a couple years back. But your thoughts about the play-in? Is it good? Is it right? Do you think as a basketball fan, you want to see it going forward?
Um, I'll put it like this. I think now, I think it's such a staple to how teams kind of value, especially like the end of the season and
Yes,
where they place at the end of the year. That it kind of just fit naturally into the game. Now, it I don't know. Like I'm still kind of at that point where it's like, man, like the first 8 seeds, if you're good enough, like especially this year in the West, if you're good enough to get a top 8 spot, then and you were able to beat the teams necessary through the course of the year, you got a top 8 spot. You deserve to go to the playoffs for that. You shouldn't
I
be,
agree.
punished because one of your players got hurt during the last few games, and now you got to play a play in, and then you lose your spot to the 10th seed. But at the same time, it's like if you're a 10th seed like the Warriors are in the West, like you do, I mean, do you deserve that shot? And then you have the East. It's like the 9 and 10 spots, like they really shouldn't even, they know they should be at home. It's like the Hawks should be at home. Like all those teams should be at home where it's like those first 8 are the solidified first 8 in that conference. So I think, this year we're seeing both ends of the spectrum. Like, man, there's an Eastern Conference play-in of teams. We really don't, we just got to fill out the rest of the bracket because we can't do it automatically. And then you have the West where it's like, LeBron
Exactly.
is I honestly I think if LeBron and like Steph and like some of those bigger names hadn't been in a play-in basically every single year, I think people would still kind of feel like, man, why is it there? But like the fact that, like LeBron James is LeBron James. He's been in a
There's a
play-in
reason to
every single
watch.
year. Exactly. Steph was in a play-in, what, 3 out of the 4 years or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that. So it's like, these are people that, that fans want to see in the
yeah.
playoffs. So,
Household names. And it's, again, like you mentioned there, I think there should be some revisions made to it. But again, are they really going to go into it and say, okay, well, the West is stacked every year. We're always going to have a 9-10 and a 7-8 matchup. But on the East, we might sometimes we don't even need a play-in. I don't think that they're ever going to do that. So I think we're always going to be at this standstill where we're going to see teams like the Hawks and the Bulls that are 10 games under 500 getting a shot to
yeah.
make the playoffs. It shouldn't happen. So I think if you're 5 games under 500, that should be like the cutoff. And if you don't make
Yeah.
it, then whatever. Because even you can still go with 9 teams in the Eastern Conference. Let's say the Bulls had a little bit of a better record. Just take the 7-8 loser and they play the 9 seed, and then they make the playoffs. Whoever wins that game. I think there should be definitely a cutoff. But again, when you're under 10 games, 10 games under 500, like the Bulls and the Hawks, you just go home. I mean, both those
Even
teams
like the
have,
Spurs the year before they got, what was it, 2 years ago? Like
yeah,
I don't even think that, yeah, DeJounte wasn't there. It's like they were just
no,
in a play-in, and it's like, okay, like, well, what are we doing in a play-in? Because they didn't have anybody. You kind of like it's like they knew they were a lottery team, but like
right.
it's weird because you're a lottery team that's like, oh, we have a chance to get to the playoffs, and then you make the playoffs and you're not in the lottery anymore. So it's just kind of like it's weird, but
Yeah. No,
yeah.
definitely an interesting dynamic here. But we move over to the Eastern Conference. The 3 seed is going to be the Milwaukee Bucks. And just like last year, Giannis has some injury concerns. So we'll talk about that next week. Give our predictions. I think the popular pick right now is the Indiana Pacers because they are coming in healthy. They have a lot of options. They're a crazy high-powered offense, and they're 4-1 against the Milwaukee Bucks, including the in-season tournament. And again, Pacers just one of those teams. They might just have the Bucks number, especially if Giannis is down. Then the 4-5 matchup. I don't understand why this series gets so much hate. Where the Cleveland Cavaliers comes in as the 4 seed. We're Cavs fans, so we're going to be watching. I got my Kyrie bobblehead here. Hopefully he can come back one day, especially with how he's playing. But the Magic come in as the 5 seed, and they have the best, one of the best young cores in the league, but also the best theme song in the league as far as a team perspective. As a Cavs fan, I guess I'll ask you this: are you looking forward to this series? I mean, I think personally, our future is on the line here if we can't get it done.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think obviously, no way around it. We're getting a coaching change this summer. I think we're not going to go into next season with the same coach, but this season is on the line because we either keep Donovan Mitchell off of this for another year, or we
Jared
got
Allen might be
rid
gone
of him.
too.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there's a lot on the line for us for in this series, and it's going to be tough, especially because you have the Magic who kind of coming in and like, I mean, we made it out of the play-in, and we aren't really supposed to be here, and you have Puelo, who's a first-time All-Star in the second year, and they're all just kind of sitting there like no pressure, like let's see what we can get done. So I think that's the scariest type of team to play.
But moving over, we also know the 1 seed is going to be the Boston Celtics, by far and away the best record team in the NBA. Again, you can argue maybe just the best team in the NBA. I know they're the odds-on favorite to win the finals, and rightfully so. The Knicks, see, they stole that 2 seed last game of the season. The Bucks lost bad to the Magic, but the Knicks won, and they got the 2 seed. It's just the Tom Thibodeau way. They don't ever stop playing 110%, and they're now in a position where they play either Miami or Philadelphia, and I think we can both agree who they would rather play in that matchup because we're going to talk about it right now. The Sixers at the 7 seed, the Heat at the 8 seed. Of course, you see the tail of the tape. The season series is tied, but I want to throw it out there. The Sixers were 2-0 in this season series when Joel Embiid was playing. So I just want to throw it out there. Of course, that could play a huge part. But when we look at the lineups here, you could say Kyle Lowry starts, or if you want to throw some other wing in there as well, that's definitely an argument. But you see the tail of the tape, the lineups, Bakari. Who do you have in this matchup? Joel Embiid is returning, but he's only got like 2 or 3 games under his belt since returning from a couple months hiatus, rather.
Yeah, and what's crazy about those 2 or 3 games? He
Didn't
looked
matter.
absolutely crazy during those games. So I'm gonna have Philly winning this series, and this Philly team. Like I think I put it like we have our personal group chat of just people we know, and I remember like the first game Joel Embiid played, he had like a crazy game, and I was thinking about it, I'm like, you know what? It wouldn't be like outside of like the Celtics, who was the next team that I personally saw like could be a Eastern Conference be up there with the Celtics, I'm like,
Right.
it's going to be the Philly because this is a team that's had to adjust to losing Joel Embiid for majority of the season. They come out there and they competed every night. Tyrese Maxey's averaging almost 30 points a game. Guys like Kelly Oubre, Buddy Hield have stepped up. Once they traded for Buddy Hield. Kyle Lowry is starting for him. Like this is a team that's just kind of had to scrap and claw their way all season long just to kind of stay in that 7-8. And then you get Joel Embiid back, and I mean, honestly, he looks like he hasn't missed a beat. He came back
No,
looking like the runaway MVP that he was probably going to be if he would have played the
no doubt.
entirety of this season. So he's healthy, or I obviously I think he got banged up a little bit last game, but he came back and played. Been a couple of days since then. So far so good. He's healthy. I think that Joel Embiid. I think this is the big year for him that he finally shows like, hey, I can get it done in the playoffs, or at least my game can translate to the playoffs. And unfortunately for the Heat, they just have to run into that type of team. I think any other time the Heat kind of edge this one out. But like I said, if there's a team that's up there with like kind of like the grind and grit level, not Memphis, that the
Right.
Heat have, I think it's Philly, especially with Nick Nurse being the coach now. So
Yeah.
and Eric Spoelstra and Jimmy Butler, all those guys are great, but this Philly team is kind of feels a little bit different this year.
Yeah, it does feel different, and that's the thing is I don't know if it's just because Embiid's playing at that crazy of a level, but I'll agree with you here. I'll take Philly in this matchup. I think we can both agree that the Knicks would rather play the Heat in this
Mhm.
matchup just because of Joel Embiid is Joel Embiid. But as weird as it sounds, this team, Joel Embiid has had Ben Simmons, prime Ben Simmons. He's had Jimmy Butler, JJ Redick around him. For some reason, this feels like the best team around Joel Embiid. Again, it could
Yeah.
just be that Joel Embiid is just that dude now. But this team, I feel, has a legitimate chance to shock the world and make it pretty far in the playoffs. I mean, you have the savvy veteran in Kyle Lowry, known for his basketball skills on and off the court, right? But Tyrese Maxey's playing at an all NBA level. Buddy Hield, of course, is going to be that DHO, JJ Redick kind of guy for Joel Embiid. He is going to get going in this playoffs, I think. And Kelly Oubre is playing his best career basketball here for the 76ers. This team, again, there's just something that feels different about them, and I'm going to take them here in that 7-8 matchup. But then we can sleep through this matchup. We really can. I mean, the Bulls at 39 and 43, the Hawks at 36 and 46. They just got Trae Young back, so that's something. Chicago's 2-1 in this matchup this season. But again, Trae Young just returned, and he missed a couple of those matchups against the Bulls. But again, the Hawks, DeJounte Murray's had a resurgence since at the trade deadline. We were told, hey, DeJounte's guaranteed gone. Sell your house. He's gone. He's going to be traded, but he's still in Atlanta. And this team is still trying to convince themselves that this is the core that can get it done and get them over the top. We've had our multiple debates on this team here, or not debates, more so slanders. But your thoughts about this matchup? I had the Bulls winning just because I'd rather see Caruso and DeMar in the playoffs or in that next matchup here in the play-in. But your thoughts here, I could be swayed either way.
Yeah, I took the Hawks here because listen, we both know that neither of these teams are beating the Heat or whoever falls to that next play-in game. Neither of these teams are winning, but I took the Hawks because honestly, this Hawks team is crazy. They can on any given night they can go beat the Celtics,
Yeah.
Thunder, and like the Nuggets in a 3-game stretch, but then lose to the Nets, Pistons, Rockets, and then like Spurs, like all the next few games. Like this Hawks team. That's just kind of been like the Hawks pretty much like their trajectory ever since that year they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. And I think it's a given that next year Trae Young or DeJounte, like both of these guys won't be on that same team. Like you mentioned, DeJounte had that resurgence when Trae was out. Trae is coming back for the play-in. That's the reason I have them edging this game out because Kobe White and DeMar are cool. Then it's like I know. I mean,
Just
it
boring.
needs to, like you said, we can stick to this matchup. I'd rather watch the Hawks play basketball than the Bulls, but that I
Yeah.
just have I feel like Atlanta's been in this position before enough to where they can go win a game.
Whoever wins this matchup, I want it to be a blowout. I want either the Hawks to blow the Bulls out or vice versa because both of these teams need a reset. The Bulls, of course, at one point in time had the trajectory of being a really good team in the Eastern Conference with Zach LaVine, Lonzo Ball, DeMar after he came off his career season in Chicago. Vucevic ideally was a great fit to space the floor. This team just hasn't got it done with all the injuries that they've had and all the drama between Zach LaVine, but I want them to get blown out if they are the losers of this matchup because DeMar needs to go, Vucevic needs to go. This team needs to suck for the next 3 years and just rebuild, in that way. But same for the Hawks, whether if you rebuild completely or you just trade a couple pieces away like Clint Capella and DeJounte Murray after he's had his resurgence. Or if you think your team's better with DeJounte than Trae Young, then trade Trae Young. He probably has more trade value on the market. I guess I'll ask you that. If you're the Hawks GM, very quickly, are you trading Trae Young or DeJounte Murray and building with the other going forward?
I think it's easier to build a team around DeJounte than Trae. I think DeJounte
You
is
think so? With 45 points on 40 shots? No,
listen,
I'm just
he had to
joking.
do that by default. Who else taking
Right.
them shots? Clint Capella. I think DeJounte is a two-way. Obviously, he hasn't he's had to make up a lot on defense for what Trae gives him, and I think his defensive numbers dip down a little bit because of that aspect. You're like, he's guarding his guy, then it's like Trae can't guard his guy. Now go guard his guy. The guy already has
All right.
25. So I think DeJounte, if he's able to get back in that same role he was in San Antonio, where he's guarding his matchup the entire game, he could play. He could be that two-way playmaker. His shooting has improved a lot since his San Antonio days as well. I think. Like I said, I think it'd be easier to build around him. And then if you trade Trae Young for like I don't know what his value looks like, because I don't know a lot of teams other than like the Spurs who would really want Trae Young because
All
he
right.
can't play defense and he's a high usage type of player. But like say you were go get like a scoring wing, like this won't happen, but like a Brandon Ingram type of player or somebody of that level. I think that DeJounte could make that work with another wing or another combo guard in the backcourt.
All right.
I don't think they need another smaller guard who can't play defense. That's just my honestly
What
a
if it's a guy like
DeJounte Zach
Devin
LaVine type
Vassell?
of huh.
Well, what if it's a guy like Devin Vassell and 2 first-round picks? Would you accept that if you're the Atlanta Hawks?
I would 2 first-round picks from the Spurs and Devin Vassell. Devin Vassell, I mean, he ain't Wemby. Like,
Right.
hey, why is this Wemby kid keep showing up on my live? That's what he said. But Devin Vassell can't play. I was just about to say, like, even like Zach LaVine, I feel like DeJounte and Zach LaVine, I think it takes some getting used to. But I feel like those two guys, they can do better than what Trae and DeJounte have been able to do over the last couple of years. So I just feel like they just kind of need a reset either way.
Well, I'm not going to fight you too hard. I'll say the Atlanta Hawks advance. And again, like we mentioned, we don't think that they can beat the Miami Heat in this matchup. The Miami Heat would then get the 8th seed. Of course, they're 3-1 against the Hawks this season. Some of those games were without Trae Young. Who knows? Maybe Trae Young has one of those New York Knicks performances in this one and gets them into the playoffs. But I hope not. They're 10 games under 500 for a reason. But then we're sitting here, of course, Boston, 1 seed. They play the Miami Heat, a team that they faced 3 of the last 4 years, and 2 of those times were in the Eastern Conference Finals. Of course, they went to 7 last year. That's a team that it was a nightmare matchup for me a couple weeks ago when I talked about it. You just don't want to see the Miami Heat just because they've seemingly had your number. And again, for a year like this where Boston seemingly has it all to win it, I think the last team you want to run into is a team that has your kryptonite or is your kryptonite. But regardless, I think Boston would still handle business. The Knicks and the Sixers, interesting matchup there. Of course, the Knicks have the defense. They have a rotation of bigs, and they're going to need it against Joel Embiid because those boys are going to be in foul trouble. But those are play-in predictions. Let us know down in the comments what your predictions are. But Bakari, next week, if you want to join us, we're going to be going through our first round predictions of the NBA, I guess, playoffs. But your final thoughts before we get out of here, and I guess your outlook here, because the play-in games start tonight.
Yeah, like I said, this is the best time of the year if you're a Western Conference team. See if your team gets into the playoffs. For the East, we're kind of sleeping until Saturday when the playoffs actually start. We don't really care about all this
Right.
this funny business going on. We know who the Knicks are going to play, or we have an idea who the Knicks and Celtics are going to play. But like I mentioned, this is the best time of year for NBA basketball in general. If you're a fan of one of these teams now, for us Cavs fans, it could go either way. We could be
Well, we're going to the
feeling
NBA
pretty
Finals.
miserable. Yeah. Well, if that's what you're betting your house on, you might as well go start living under the bridge. But
You might kick me out
it's
under
always
there.
a pleasure being on here. It's always a pleasure being on here. Obviously throwback to the old days. Last year we were doing everything like by week. It was like honestly the playoffs and like predictions last year, because they were so crazy and like not a lot of the stuff happened and what we thought was going to happen. It was probably the best part of like coming on and doing the basketball pods. It's like, oh, are the Heat going to like it felt like every single series you're like, man, Heat are going to get blown out, and then they win the series. So it's like those types of things happen, and that's why it's the best time.
Yeah, no, we definitely we bet against the Heat a lot last season, and hey, I mean in Western Conference or in the conference finals, I think we both picked the Heat in that matchup. Or no, we both picked the Celtics and we both picked the Lakers. right? So we got completely wrong on both sides of the of the coin there. But again, hopefully this year can just be as crazy as last year. I mean, if the Hawks really want to go on to some crazy finals run, I'm not opposed to the
No.
finals. But if another playing team wants to go on to the finals, I would love to see it. And again, maybe that'll change our opinions on the play-in here in the coming days. But again, always a pleasure to have you. Maybe we'll see you next week. If not, here, I'm sure we'll see you pretty soon.